to this IB revision video for the IB from 2023 onwards, and this video is looking at water and it is video number 1. Please remember that these videos do not contain every bit of information you need and it should be backed up by your own revision. And the content in this video is for standard level and higher level, and I'll identify when it becomes higher level. So then, first thing we need to know is what is water and why is it so important? So the key thing is water is absolutely vital for life. Water is a medium for life. And what that means is it's been used to actually make living things and to allow life to occur. If you think about a cell is just a small volume of water that has become enclosed by lipids forming membranes. So the actual cell that was first made with the main substance being water trapped within a membrane. Substances in water and chemical reactions occur between solutes. So basically whenever you have a chemical reaction in a living thing, it is because water is acting as a solvent and the things that are dissolved in it are allowed therefore to react together because the particles can collide. And water allows molecules to interact inside cells and outside cells. So water absolutely essential. Why is it essential? So obviously it first allowed life to originate in it, and now it's an essential medium where life processes occur. Without life, water, there is no life. Okay, and you should know some basic things about water, which I'm not going to go into here, but considering it's tasteless, colourless and odourless, water is an amazing molecule, which is obviously essential for us even being here. Now this all comes back to one thing, and this idea links a lot of this module, and that is hydrogen bonding. So you need to be able to explain what hydrogen bonding is, why it occurs and its importance, and apply it to the different things. So the reason hydrogen bonding generally occurs is due to parts of molecules having slightly positive and slightly negative charges, and that is because in molecules there is an uneven distribution of electrons. So in water, for example, the electrons are found much more towards the oxygen than the hydrogen. And what that gives is water's oxygen molecule has a slightly negative charge, whereas water's hydrogen molecules have a slightly positive charge. Now what that means is that the water molecules interact with each other because the slightly negative bits are attracted to the slightly positive bits. And you might get something like this, so you might be asked to draw something like this in an exam. And here you can see you've got hydrogen here, which has D+, which means delta positive, which means it's very slightly positively charged, and that then is attracted via hydrogen bonds to oxygen, which has a delta negative there, so it's got a D negative. So I would suggest that when you do this, you don't ever just write plus negative, you write D plus D negative to show it's a very slight positive charge and a very slight negative charge. And here's another one here, so you've got the negative oxygen, D minus, attached to the positive hydrogen, D plus. And here's a different version of it just for you to see here again. So again, why is the oxygen slightly negative? Because it's got more electrons attracted towards it. The hydrogen is positive as a result. And you can see here the attraction between the water molecules. So hydrogen bonds make a network of atoms which constantly break and reform in water. This makes it difficult for molecules to escape. And this is one of the reasons water has a high boiling point of 100 degrees. Other molecules similar to water are simple covalent structures which have a lower melting point because they can't make hydrogen bonds, but water can, and it raises that boiling point up to 100 degrees. An example of that is hydrogen sulfide, and it's normally a gas at room temperature, so it's already boiled about 20 degrees because it has no hydrogen bonds, and that is the only difference really between it and water, which is H2O. When water cools, it loses its kinetic energy and more hydrogen bonds then become formed because they can't be broken. And water is one of the only molecules to become less dense when it becomes a solid rather than a liquid. So here you can see that graph which shows this. So you can see most materials go like this if you follow the pen structure here, and they'll get more and more dense as they get colder and colder and colder. Sorry, I did that wrong. They'll go more up here, sorry, and get more and more dense. They get colder and colder and colder. But water, you can see, as it gets colder, it gets more dense, more dense, more dense, more dense, until 4 degrees, and then its density drops. And that's really important because that means that ice is less dense than cold water. And that means that ice will float, and that means you get these important factors here. So you can see underneath ice there is water which is moving, which means that living things don't die in lakes if it freezes over, so they still can move through. Things on the surface then creates a surface which things can walk on, and you might think, well, that's not important like places like the UK, but actually stuff like polar bears and things rely on that sea ice to hunt from. And the reason for that is the hydrogen bonding. So the hydrogen bonding here, when the water's really cold and it becomes ice, holds the molecules in a certain sort of connected way, and that gives spaces between the water molecules, whereas when they're normally just moving, those hydrogen bonds don't cause that to happen. So the water is less dense when it freezes into a solid ice. So effectively, hydrogen bonds restrict the movement of water, so they have a relatively large amount of energy is needed to make the temperature rise. Even with drastic temperature changes, water temperature remains stable, and that is an essential quality of life. Okay, heat energy is also used up, and that allows us to use it to keep ourselves cool in terms of like sweat, etc. Let's have a look at a couple of key things. There is something called specific heat capacity, and the specific heat capacity of water is 4.2 joules per gram per degrees Celsius. Sorry. So what that means is it takes 4.2 joules of water to heat 1 gram of, 4.2 joules of energy to heat 1 gram of water by 1 degrees C. This is very high, and it means that it takes a lot of energy to raise the temperature of water. And that's why if you go swimming, let's say in the UK, in the sea temperature doesn't change very much. Even if you're having a really hot day, the sea temperature doesn't change very much. It would take a lot of energy to do so. And this minimizes fluctuations in temperature in cells, so it means that enzymes don't get denatured or don't slow down if it gets cold. And it means the environment, the habitat organisms live in, are very, very constant. Now, this does show us the impact of climate change because our sea temperatures have been resistant to climate change, but they are changing now, which shows you the amount of extra energy that is on the planet. Something called latent heat of vaporization, and again, if water takes a lot of energy to change temperature, it's going to take a lot of energy to change state from a liquid to a gas, and that is what latent heat of vaporization means. Now, animals can use this because they can use it as a cooling mechanism. So when we sweat as humans, we're using that energy. The body uses the heat energy in it to then evaporate that sweat from your skin, and therefore it cools you down because it uses up that energy. Animals use it for panting, and plants also use it for transpiration. So when that water evaporates from the top of a leaf, it's causing a cooling effect for that organism because it uses lots of energy to turn the gas from a liquid and evaporate it in, the water from a liquid and evaporate it into a gas. There's one called latent heat of fusion, and it would take a lot of energy again to turn water from a solid state to a liquid state. And obviously that is important at the moment because we are obviously seeing a lot more ice melting as a result. So it's again one thing that could keep the environment stable, but we're starting to see a change in. So water is an important metabolite. So this is something that students often overlook because they don't think of it in reactions, but water is pretty much involved in every reaction in your body because even if it isn't directly involved as a metabolite, it is a solvent. But first of all, let's look at the word metabolite. So here what we mean is metabolite means it's involved in metabolism. It's part of the metabolism. And there are two reactions which you will learn about much more next in the next video, but are absolutely essential for this whole course that you are doing, because it keeps coming up over and over again. So there are two reactions. One is one where water is removed, and we'll do that one first, called condensation. So a condensation reaction here is if we want to join two molecules together. So here we've got molecule 1, molecule 2. We want to join those together. We have to remove a water molecule. So a water molecule has to come out, and that is called a condensation reaction. If I want to rejoin those molecules, separate those molecules and pull them back apart, I have to add water to the reaction again. And therefore, water is absolutely essential in two reactions, condensation and hydrolysis, which we'll look at more next time. There is something called cohesion tension of water, which is absolutely essential for plants, but also for animals and living water. And this is the idea that because of the hydrogen bonds, water molecules tend to stick together in chains. They're attracted towards each other due to the hydrogen bonds, and this allows living organisms to walk on water, such as this insect here, because the water molecules are attracted to each other, so they're not breaking the surface. But in plants, it's absolutely essential because chains of water molecules are attracted to each other and therefore pulled up the plant when water is lost as evaporation via the leaves. So it means water can travel up high distances. Water can constant state in temperature means it can be used as a transport medium as well. So obviously, because water sticks together in the plants, it takes minerals up with it that are dissolved, and obviously we use water in our blood. So as I said a few moments ago, water is an essential solvent. It needs to be able to allow things to react. Now, solubility isn't guaranteed. Not everything dissolves in water, as you know, oil, for example. It all depends on how it interacts. So if a solvent is polar, which means it's got a positive or a negative charge, it will dissolve in water because it will interact with the negative oxygen or the positive hydrogens. Molecules have negative and positive parts, and water molecule therefore will cluster together and keep charged parts separate so they become ions. Once dissolved, they can move and interact with each other and collide and go into enzymes' active sites, and that is why metabolic reactions can occur. Now, you also need to be able to compare the properties of air and water and the impacts of positives and negatives on living organisms. And the two suggested in the specification is the ringed seal and the Arctic loon. So they have consequences and benefits for whether they live in the water or in the air, because of the two different properties due to the different molecules that make the air and the water up. Think about both of these. They both spend time on land because they are able to come onto land, the seals, and they'll spend time in water foraging for food. So the Arctic loon will feed on things in the water. So this has an impact on their energy usage and their life. If you think about it, which one will spend more energy staying afloat, the seal in water or the loon in the air? Well, hopefully you can think about it. The seal in water is going to have a lot more buoyancy in the water, so therefore it will be naturally kept afloat, whereas the loon flying in the air will obviously need to use lots more energy to do so, so it will need a higher energy source and lots of respiration. However, moving through the water is going to take up lots of energy, so that means that the seal is going to need lots of energy to swim through the water because of the resistance of the water, something called viscosity. So again, water is more dense, so seals have a higher buoyancy, and therefore they use less energy for that. Water is more viscous, so more energy is needed to swim through it by the seal. So you see there are different consequences of living on the land or living in water for the two different organisms. The other thing then, if you think about energy wise, is temperature. So water has a higher thermal conductivity, so it conducts heat away quicker, whilst the air will act more as an insulator. So the seal will lose a lot more energy to the water, and therefore it's going to need a lot more energy to keep warm, and obviously it has blubber to maintain and insulate itself. So it's an adaptation that is needed as a consequence of living in water. Water does have a high specific heat capacity though, so the temperature of water rarely changes. It won't suddenly change. HL students, you also need to know about something called the Goldilocks zone, and that is the idea of it being just too hot, just too right, or too cold, like Goldilocks. And the Earth is in just the right place with just the right characteristics in our solar system to allow the abundance of life that we have now, and particularly the water that we have here on our planet. So we also need to know then, well, how did the water get here? We don't think water existed on the Earth when planet Earth was formed because the temperature would have been too hot, so it would have all been boiled and lost into space. So we actually think water would have arrived first on an asteroid coming into the planet. But what they think from that is, well, currently the huge amounts of water on planet Earth would not be enough to be delivered from the current amount of asteroids that hit the Earth. Okay, so how do we think this could have happened then? Well, there's a couple of different theories. More asteroids probably hit the Earth in the beginning. So there were more asteroids floating around space, more of them collided with the planet. Earlier in time, asteroids would have had more water because slowly over time, as asteroids have gone around the sun in their orbit, they've lost water due to evaporation from the sun because they don't have any protection. So the asteroids would have carried much more water per asteroid that hit the Earth. And also over time, the asteroids would have lost the water because their gravity is weak, so it's not held onto. So again, asteroids in the past would have hit the Earth more, and they would have had more water because less water has been evaporated at that point because the heat from the sun has been evaporating water. So asteroids have lost water slowly over time. And the other reason is that because the asteroids are small, their gravity is weak, so any water on them would have been lost as they fly through space. And there are two factors that then allow water to stay on Earth, and these two factors are the distance from the sun and stronger gravity. So because of the distance from the sun, the temperature on the Earth doesn't get so hot that the water boils away due to cohesion from hydrogen bonding. So the water molecules stick together due to that cohesion, that traction due to the hydrogen bonding, and the temperature of the Earth wasn't over 100 degrees, so therefore it didn't evaporate. And why is it over 100 degrees? Due to the distance of the sun. I'll also say probably due to the atmosphere forming, which we'll talk about in a later video. And there is also the fact that the Earth had quite strong gravity because the Earth's a big planet. Therefore, the oceans and gases were held into the atmosphere. Very little water escapes into space. Only small amounts of hydrogen and helium escape into space from our atmosphere because everything else is held in and pulled into the Earth due to the Earth's own gravitational